Stephen Carroll, our business editor, is joining me here on set now, and he's starting in the US today. Fresh hopes for a stimulus plan for the economy, Stephen.
That's right. The White House has made a new offer on a package of government help, much needed in the US, but an issue that's been under discussion since the summer now, since the last stimulus package that was passed at the height of the pandemic in March expired. That's involved, for example, unemployment benefits. A lot of people who are getting extra money up until the end of July, they haven't been getting the money since then. So it is something that is really badly needed. This new plan, announced by the US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, the total value of it is $916 billion. It would include $40 billion for unemployment benefits, but crucially not bringing back those extra unemployment benefits that had expired at the end of July. It does include, though, a $600 stimulus check or $1,200 for couples that would be direct payments sent out to Americans to try and help them through this crisis. This proposal coming after a bipartisan group of senators came up with their own proposal last week. That's separate now to the negotiations that are taking place at the high levels of those parties, but they came up with a package of $908 billion. They have much more money for unemployment benefits, and they would bring back some of those expired benefits. They're saying $300 a week would be given an extra unemployment benefit, so that would be a big boost to people affected there. They've also got $288 billion for small businesses in their package as well. Also some money for schools and for local government. Looking
at all this then, Stephen, what prospects do any of these deals actually have of being implemented, though?
Well, essentially, the two people that you have to convince in this is Nancy Pelosi, the Democrat House Leader, and Mitch McConnell, who's the Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans. The Democrats have responded to the White House offer, describing it as unacceptable that unemployment benefits were not extended in the plan coming from the White House. They say that this offer shouldn't be allowed to distract from their negotiations that they're having. And they are talks that are ongoing. Mitch McConnell from the Republicans dropping, for example, in his latest offer, a key demand of his party, and that was to offer legal protection for businesses and schools due to the pandemic. But he wants Democrats to drop one of their key demands as well, and that was to do with immediate help for local government. Look, they're still talking, so there's still a prospect. But this would only in any case be an interim plan until the new administration takes over in January. President-elect Joe Biden has called on Congress to do a deal. Everyone accepts that it is much needed money that needs to be agreed and needs to be spent. The head of the central bank in the US also weighing in on this, saying it's badly needed. Still no deal yet, but we're getting a little bit closer, it looks like.
OK, that's the US. Let's go to Australia for this next story. The government there is pushing ahead with plans to make big tech companies pay news organisations for their journalism.
It's tabled a bill which would force Google and Facebook to negotiate payments to news providers for displaying their content on their platforms. The proposed code of conduct requires a deal to be struck, or the companies will face binding arbitration. The legislation is designed to support the local media industry in Australia. It won't be passed until next year. With more, here's our correspondent Rochelle Harrison-Pless in Sydney.
The Australian government has thrown down the gauntlet to Google and Facebook this Wednesday, unveiling new legislation in Parliament that would force the internet giants to pay Australian media companies to feature news content on their platforms. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg says this media bargaining law is a world first and would level the playing field, as tech heavyweights have long been accused of profiting from the work of journalists without having to pay a cent for it. The platforms rake in billions of dollars selling online ad space against the attention paid to news content that they didn't produce. Currently, Google and Facebook command more than 80% of the Australian online advertising market. Well, this new code of conduct seeks to correct this power imbalance by having both parties hammer out a payment deal. If there's a deadlock after 3 months, they'll be forced into arbitration. This landmark legislation will set up both sides for a showdown, with Google and Facebook no doubt fearing similar laws and larger payouts in other countries.
Sharon Harrison-Pless there. What's happening on the markets then, Stephen?
Well, we're keeping an eye on the value of sterling, of course, ahead of that key meeting with Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen later over a post-Brexit trade deal. The pound up slightly against the dollar in trading for just under $1.34. Pretty flat against the euro at €1.10. Of course, sterling is where we tend to see big market moves when things happen to do with Brexit. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that later in the day. On the stock markets, gains across most of Asia. The Nikkei and Nokia, the Nikkei and Tokyo.
The Nikkei and Nokia.
We should definitely rename it that. Up 1.3% at the close of trading, just Shanghai seeing falls. Investors generally optimistic about a coronavirus vaccine. That's helping to boost shares as well. But of course, keeping an eye on the developments as we've seen case numbers continue to rise in many parts of the world.
I'm trying not to laugh, Stephen. That's the best spoonerism I've ever heard, I think. Stephen Carroll with Business Off for Us 24.